why we're doing what we do at the Land Art Generator Initiative. Are you able to see our screen advance? Super.
So let's all go back to the late 19th century and the beginning of electrification, when all of our power plants were located right in the hearts of our cities because we couldn't raise the voltage high enough to transmit electricity efficiently. So we have all of these relics of that time, like this beautiful power plant in Lisbon that's been converted into the Energy Museum. The Tate Modern in London is another great example, or Battersea down the Thames. It is the reason we've preserved these monuments to that era of electricity is because they're so beautiful. But as we were able to raise the voltage high enough to transmit long distances, we moved that infrastructure out of our cities. And today, very few people know where their electricity even comes from. And it was good that we did that because these were coal and gas fired power plants that were very polluting, and no one wants to live next to one of those if you don't have to. Some people do still have to, of course. But the great energy transition that we're now in the midst of, it offers a wonderful opportunity to bring those infrastructures back into the hearts of our cities and think about how they coexist with our built environment and our landscapes. Of course, the centralized paradigm of energy generation continued into the first stages of the energy transition, as large-scale wind and solar developments have created these energy landscapes that some people find objectionable aesthetically. Particularly, that's not a major concern of ours, but it is a massive barrier to the rapid deployment of these infrastructures when you have community pushback and objection to these. And we have moratoria coming up as these landscapes start to compete with other ex-urban uses. But the history of the intersection between design, art, and energy infrastructure is rich. If you go back to the Works Progress Administration era of the United States, when the last time that was such a large investment was made in infrastructure, you have the Works Progress Administration employing 10,000 artists to gild this infrastructure with their design and their beauty. And so that 1 million people today go to visit the Hoover Dam, not to learn about hydroelectricity per se, but to see these beautiful Art Deco sculptures in the desert landscape. And we think that we have an opportunity in this great energy transition where we're going to be spending trillions of dollars on this new infrastructure to think about how these can be beautiful contributions and what landscapes will we be creating today? What energy landscapes will people come to visit in the future to reflect on this important time in our history?
In 2008, we had just moved to Dubai, and we're really thinking about all of the pinch points to the energy transition. And we were newly married actually at that time. So we wanted a project to work on together that fused our talents and skills. And we thought, okay, if aesthetics is one of those pinch points to the energy transition, then not in my backyard voices, then what can we do? How do we push through that? So we imagined designers and creatives of all types coming to the table to reimagine our energy landscapes as public art. Since that time, and because of that thought process we went through in early 2008, we started innovating some design competitions. So our first was held in Dubai in 2010. Actually, Dubai and Abu Dhabi for 3 sites, 2 sites in Abu Dhabi, 1 in Dubai, and those were urban gateways. Since that time, we've developed competitions by invitation around the world. And, you know, it's always the main theme is to combine renewable energy infrastructure with placemaking, public art, and aesthetics. How does a power plant become a safe place where you can go for a picnic with your family? And you can see up here the snapshot of the competitions we've held. They're all a different site typologies and a different sort of partnership set for each project. What that's done is it's built a really huge portfolio. We have over 1,500 ideas sitting in a portfolio right now that cities around the world can come to us and say, look, I've got a landfill, I've got to resolve an issue here, and we want some energy landscapes on this landfill. We've got a portfolio to match that need. We also hold invited competitions that are an opportunity to really celebrate local and regional talent, whereas the open call competitions invite everyone from around the world.
We're going to run through some examples by technology type, and each one of these is very much a reflection of the design brief that was co-developed with the stakeholders for that project. Using solar technology, you can create objects like the Arch of Time, which we're really glad to be developing at full scale for the city of Houston presently. So this is an example of a past submission, and artist Ricardo Mariano, who is in Berlin. He actually works at Oliver Eliasson studio, but he has his own practice, and this is his own entry to the LAGI 2019 competition for Abu Dhabi that was chosen out of a portfolio by the city of Houston and local stakeholders for development in Houston. It generates 400,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year from a 350 kilowatt array on the south facing side of the artwork, which geometry is a reflection of the sun path for Houston. So the artist took the Abu Dhabi geometry and adapted it slightly to Houston, where it actually leans a little bit further south, so it's a little bit more dynamic. And it tracks the sun throughout the day, creating a beautiful beam of light as a performance art piece in the middle of a 25,000 square foot shaded area every hour on the solar hour. Bloom is an entry to LAGI 2022 Mannheim, which is a modular, scalable solution for bringing renewable energy into public spaces and civic parks. And it provides various flexible spaces for people to sit and relax or do various other activities in the park. Moving beyond the conventional blue solar panels, you can also use laminated solar panels and tinted solar panels. These are perfectly acceptable technologies for the LAGI 2025 Fiji competition. And you can see that they can be used very creatively in custom module shapes to create things like this beautiful photovoltaic sun for the city of Abu Dhabi. This is the first entry that was ever uploaded to our design competition in 2010. And Antonio Maca has entered every single LAGI competition since then, and we really hope he enters Fiji as well this year. Light Up uses a custom lamination technology, a lenticular film that allows the sun through to the cells from a perpendicular angle, but from an angle of a viewer on the street, gives off this yellow hue, creating a ribbon, almost a river of photovoltaic energy flowing over Jacob Boulevard in Melbourne to create a safe cat park over there to allow people to walk from St. Kilda Triangle to the foreshore, and generates enough electricity to power hundreds of homes. Other technology types, which we're actually recommending we don't focus on for LAGI 2025 Fiji, and we can come back to that for a number of reasons, but it could be in addition to the required 75 kilowatt capacity. One could propose to add additional elements that incorporate this kind of technology. These are organic photovoltaics and dye-sensitized solar cells. These have a little bit of a more limited life cycle and a lower conversion efficiency, but they're very versatile as a media for creative expression, as you can see here in Beyond the Wave, an entry to LAGI 2014, which uses that technology to create these beautiful pink ribbons flowing in the air. And as Elizabeth said earlier, this is the kind of power plant where you can take your family for a picnic. Other kinds of solar technologies that are on that spectrum from pure utility to pure public art, we'd like to remind folks that there's a lot of different opportunities within that range to think about designing energy landscapes thoughtfully that can actually be extremely productive and cost effective, just so that they're not, a chain link fence with barbed wire and panels on a gravel field. They can be used as elements of design thoughtfully and engage communities in the design process to come up with things like you see on the screen here. Of course, LAGI competitions also encourage other kinds of renewable energy technology. This is an example of a project that was built in the UK a couple of years ago called WindNest, which is also one of the first competition entries from 2010, adapted for a new context at a project called Sea Monster. Water technologies are a really important part of LAGI 2025 Fiji, as you'll read in the design guideline document. And so we offer this as one example of a past project from our competition in partnership with Burning Man for their property Fly Ranch. And so this is LAGI 2020. One of the shortlisted projects used these community co-created vessels that contain porcelain filters inside of them to filter water to drinking level quality from the Fly Reservoir and create habitat for local pollinator species. So wrapping up, this is that example of what not to do necessarily. This is often what comes about when communities bring solar projects into vacant land in urban areas. And while this does reduce the carbon intensity of our grid, and that's wonderful, it does a bit of a disservice to the overall energy transition movement when this is the image that people have in mind when they think about solar energy. And there are so many alternatives to that we like to highlight and that use various different technologies and design processes.
So, we offer these as examples of ways of creating community solar and getting away from that paradigm of chain link fences and barbed wire. These are from our solar mural program. And the upper right-hand corner uses a slightly different technology from the two others, but essentially there is a film on this one on the wall in La Monarca that is placed on top of the solar panel. It's been developed so that there's a very only slight efficiency loss in the output, the electrical output.
And this type of technology would also be suitable for the 75 kilowatt array in Fiji as well. Now to get to the fun part, we just launched on Monday the design competition that will be open until May 5th. We understand that you're going to be doing the bulk of your design work this month, and we welcome you to, once that process is complete, go ahead and upload your design to the portal on our competition website. We want to make sure you know that if anytime before May 5th you have an idea and you want to change any of your narrative, your boards, or your images, that's totally fine. And even after you've hit submit, you can always come back and up until May 5th, make any changes you want to make. So just so that in early February, when you complete your design work, we recommend that you go ahead and upload it then, because there's going to be a lot in your life between then and May 5th, and we don't want you to forget to do it. So you can always come back.
We're just going to quickly go through some of the design brief to try to hit points where we think there might be questions. But of course, please chime in, raise your hand if you have questions at any point. To begin, we are delighted that we're working in Fiji, and it was by invitation of Ilisari Nongao, the acting chief of Moreau Village, that we are working in that village with that particular community. In June, we made our first trip to Fiji, and he heard about, through a roundabout way, heard that about the work that we do and asked if his village could host a design competition. So we were delighted. We do our best work when we're invited and not imposing ourselves. So that is sort of a policy within our organization, is that we work by invitation. So it was quite lovely. We've had multiple co-design sessions with the community in June, and then back again in late August and early September. So the design brief itself is very much a reflection of what the community has asked for. So you are, yes, designing for LAGI 2025, but in fact, you're designing for what this community has requested.
And Moreau Village is the most important partner, project partner for LAGI 2025 Fiji. We really have fallen in love with the community. They are just unbelievably wonderful and joyful. Every time we come, they greet us with song on the beach and a new offering of flowers, and it's just kind of overwhelming. And we then take the day to talk through with them the challenges they face in their daily life. They are a very remote village, so everything that they have comes on a boat, often a small skiff. And so logistics are challenging. That's one of the things to consider in the brief. They really have very little access to electricity now. They share a diesel generator in the village that is managed by the village elders, and it is run a few hours a day as diesel fuel permits. It's hard to get and it's expensive. So outside of those hours, it's fairly unelectrified except for a few small panels that folks have on their roof for lighting purposes. And the village was identified by the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, another important.
Before we were invited in,
Yeah.
there was another separate process that we will be a part of as we continue our process. But the village had already been identified as a part of the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund.
One of 75 villages to be identified as needing electrification and qualifying for it in terms of available land area and willingness and openness of the community to bring that infrastructure in and to help maintain that infrastructure over time, which is also a very important consideration. So we worked with the community to identify all of the challenges and opportunities that could come, and we walked the land to identify the best place to think about installing a microgrid for electrification of Moreau Village. What you see on the screen now is a overview of the entire area extending from the neighboring village of Malevu all the way up to Yasawa School. Yasawa School is a kind of K-12 educational institution that the high school component certainly is the only school in the entire Yasawa archipelago. So folks come in by boat to the school, and sometimes whole families stay time to help with cooking lunches and everything. So it's very much of a community effort to maintain that school. There are a few solar panels on the roof of the school owned by the high school component. But other than that, the other big challenge that was identified by the community is access to water. Because when we were there in September, it was in the middle of the dry period and for the weather, and they had been without rain for at least a month straight at that point. And so the school was operating on a half schedule, and sometimes they have to close the school entirely because there's not enough access to water. So water became one of the critical components identified in terms of the design need for this competition. Therefore, we're asking for a 75 kilowatt photovoltaic capacity array, and that could be in any number of design approaches within that yellow area. That yellow area is much larger than you would need to install a ground mount 75 kilowatt array. You could probably fit more than a dozen of those in that area. So it gives flexibility to think about the way that the installation relates to the landscape, relates to the community who uses this land now for children play in this area. There's some farming that goes on, mostly cassava in that area. So how can agrivoltaic ideas be considered? How can this land use be shared between energy generation and other productive uses? We've got some photos, and you'll find in the supplemental materials page on the website lots of information and many, many photos that you can download in batches of zipped folders.
And you're welcome to design on those, and that can be integrated as a part of your final submission. Those images are free to use for this context. Um, we're not sure if you've gone through the design brief. Would it be helpful if we went through it right now? Yeah, super.
So like we said, the primary focus is to, within that yellow area on the map, install a 75 kilowatt array of photovoltaic to support a mini grid. Um, we want you to think about water harvesting as well. Um, we didn't want to be too complex in this requirement. So even if you're collecting rainwater from the solar panels and channeling those to an on-site cistern, an above grade tank, that's meets the requirement, check. But if you want to get more creative, we've put together a field guide to regenerative water technologies. That's a download also on the supplementary materials page that goes through a lot of different water harvesting technologies, and you may want to consider incorporating some of those ideas into your design as well. And we're really excited to see the synergies between energy and water systems that can be developed, along with the other shared land uses and social co-benefits that the project can provide to the villagers. Um, there are 67 households. We didn't mention that. It's a fairly small village, but we do expect that population to increase. There is another Fiji Rural Electrification Fund project, one of the first projects within that program on an island called Vio, near to VT Levu, the larger island. And that was installed, and then within a year, the population nearly doubled, because there's a strong attachment to local place in Fiji. And when folks need to leave home for work on the mainland, they do, but they will always want to return home if they can. So when Moreau Village becomes electrified, we expect the population will grow.
The next 2 points are pretty important. It does need to be pragmatic and constructible, your design. We really do not encourage unicorns here. This is a project that is not just speculative. We will be going into development. So we really encourage you to think through how can a project you're designing, while at the same time being, rise to that level of being art in the landscape, how can it also be resilient to the forces? They get Category 5 cyclones out there. That happens. And they're not going to be thinking about how do we protect this energy infrastructure when that hits. And it needs to be pragmatic and constructible. And in this case, part of being pragmatic means, how do you get those supplies out to this site? And we've, provided some information on that throughout this design brief. And if you have questions, email us. We go through a very rigorous Q&A process, so all questions are relevant. And then also modularity and scalability. So we can tell you this, this is what we're considering a pilot project. It was asked early on before you all came on, how's the project being funded? Now, we cannot tell you who's funding it. There's an anonymous donor, but there's very strong interest in all project partners, including our project funder, to see that these projects can be scaled around the Pacific Islands and integrated throughout. So LAGI 2025 Fiji, when we close the competition in May, is not over by far. This project will go on for several years. We can promise you that. And that will mean revisiting the portfolio throughout the next couple of years and continuing to build partnerships with the design teams who have submitted. So how do these projects act in a modular capacity? How can it be modular so that as community moves back to Moreau, it can become larger? How can it be scaled both there on site in Moreau, but scaled throughout Fiji and the Pacific Islands? These are very important questions for this competition.
It's also important to note, taking a step back, big picture, is that right now we're basically, the consensus is that we've passed the 1.5 Celsius threshold of warming since pre-industrialization. And that means that life is not going to get easier for folks who live on the shorelines of these small islands. And this is intended to be an advancing of the solution set for these communities, as Elizabeth said, writ large. Pacific Islands and Caribbean islands and other islands all around the world are dealing with these same issues. So right now, the paradigm is very much the same if you were to install something in rural New York State. You're going to see the same photovoltaic array as the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund is building in VO Island in their early projects. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just this competition is intended to ask the question, can we do better? Can we engage community in the process? That we've done that work with the design brief co-development, but the winning teams are going to be there in Fiji, building a prototype, engaging more with the community, learning from them, adapting their design into this pilot project, which that will then also learn and adapt for future projects. And we just want to try and push the envelope about what is possible, combining energy and water together, of course. And so really it's important to remember that as you
Also,
embark.
I do want to emphasize that aesthetics are a very important consideration in Moreau Village, and all of Fiji. So it's not just the resorts that are thinking through the aesthetics of these installations. It is the villages. They've, been in a village for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they have a landscape that they get to sit with and be with. And, like anyone, they don't want to have a visual conflict. I think we're going to move on because there's a lot of this that you can go through, and I just want to hit some other points. But
one thing before we do, we know that folks are going to be thinking about cost. So what we have placed here is we don't want to be too limiting. If you were to install a ground mount array in US or Canada today, it would probably be more around $2 to $3 a watt. But the first pilot projects in Fiji are running higher than that, as high as $10 a watt because of the logistics and the remote nature, and the cost of working in these communities. We would like to keep that your design to around 15, because we know you're incorporating water systems, you're incorporating design elements, you're maybe doing something that is different than a conventional installation. So we're targeting that, but we're not asking for a spreadsheet. We're not asking you to do a detailed accounting, but we just want you to sort of keep that as a target, and instinctively sort of aim for that.
There is a lot of information in here for you to go through. Again, we can chime back in, we can respond through email, but let's just talk a little bit about the process and the awards. There are two $100,000 awards, so 200,000 total. Each team that is provided with their 100,000 is expected to create a small functioning prototype with those funds. Of course, that 100,000 will include, travel and time, and there's a lot to accomplish with $100,000, but it doesn't have to be a large prototype. It does need to demonstrate that the project will function.
And we're going to be very much along the process to assist with local logistics, help with travel planning. We've got a great local team on board who will be able to help out. So the two winning teams will have a lot of support.
And we're going to come back to the submission format, but I just also want to mention the publication. As in all of our competitions, we're very fortunate to have contracts with major publishers. For LAGI 2025 Fiji, we're working with Hermer again. And of course, this is broad distribution. We are lucky that we get to feature around 60 to 70 of the submissions. Not everything makes it into the book, but we get as many in as we can, as many submissions. So student work is always a part of our publication, and we really love that about the competition, that there is that level of eyes on your projects. There will also be exhibitions being held in partnership with the Fiji Arts Council, excuse me. For your submission, basically you're putting together 3 A1 boards. Those boards don't have to be complicated. We get boards where it's a single image. Please know that this is an anonymous process, and that is very important to us as an organization, that the selection process is very fair. So please don't put any identifying information on your boards, no names, no university, those types of details.
And the same thing applies to the narrative file, which can be a DOC or DOCX file. And we have a template that you can download. It basically is what you see here on the screen, and then allows you to fill in the blanks. And then we do ask for 3 to 12 high resolution images. That helps us streamline the publication because we're going to be putting it all together in like 2 months.
Yeah, it goes to print August 1. So when we close the competition, we're working on the book immediately. And we need to get all of this stuff to our graphic designer as streamlined as possible. So we do ask that they're CMYK. We know that people will forget that, and we have a process for dealing with that. But the best you can go through these motions is helpful to our entire team.
And for those diagrams, take the text off them, because we'll be doing the style guide for the entire book will be consistent for those, and we'll recreate those leaders in that context.
And then, because you're students, I'm going to throw out one more consideration, is if you submit and you know that come May 10, you're graduating and you will no longer have your university email address, please use another email address so we don't have to figure out how to track you down if we need more content from you or permissions to put your book in the publication.
Or we want to give you $100,000.
We want to give you $100,000. We want to be able to contact you. And our first pass of contacting folks is through email. And this has happened, but this is why I'm saying it, because university students often use a university email address, which is great. However, oftentimes they lose access to that. So just a point of consideration. Look, we're going to stop there so that you can chime in with questions.
Great. Thank you so much. This is perfect.